QuickBooks Pro Plus Desktop 2022, Company Preferences, Desktop View, Finance Charge, and General. Let's get into it with Intuit's QuickBooks Pro Plus Desktop 2022. If you have access to OneNote, would like to follow along, icon, left-hand side, topic introductions, 6120 company preferences, desktop view, finance charge, and general. Also take a look at the immersive reader tool, topic introductions, also in the text area, same name, same number, but with transcripts. Transcripts that can be translated into multiple languages, either listened to or read in them. We also have the same name and number as presentations. Topic introductions designed to give an introduction to the topic. Provide screenshots, links where applicable, accounting background to complement the presentations. You can also use them to follow along with the presentations if you don't have access to the software at that time. Closing the icon, left-hand side, we're looking at the company preferences again. So we're going to be going to the edit drop-down, the preferences down at the bottom. And within there, we're going to be now looking at the left-hand side, the desktop view, 2 tabs up top. We're starting in the My Preferences. So we have the multiple screens as the default. So you can have multiple screens that you can toggle around within the system. And then desktop, save when closing company is the default. I'll try to point out when we're going to move away from the default, basically here. Show home page when opening the company. So whenever you open the company file, it's going to be opening up that home page. If you don't like that, you can turn that off there. The window displays, we took a look at this in the past. If you want to then increase the icons and make the screen larger so the icons are larger, you'll actually go into the Windows setting, which you could do from here. You could do the same thing with the sound, and that'll take you into your Windows settings. You can also go there just basically on your PC or on your computer as well. Company file color scheme, you could change the color scheme here, which a lot of people might like. We're going to keep the default color scheme so most people can see it and recognize it as kind of like the default. And so here we are on the display size. We have our display up at 150. So if you want your icons larger like they kind of are here, this is where you go to find it, which is in your computer settings in the display settings. And so if we go back to the company preferences, then up top in the desktop view company preferences, we've got the customers, we've got the sales receipt, and we've got the statement charges. These are going to be the defaults. These are going to be items that are on the home page, and they're typically going to be there by default depending on the preferences that you have set up, but you have some options to kind of vary them. So for example, you could remove these from the page. So if I go down here, notice if I unclick the sales receipt, there's no sales receipt icon that was there at the beginning right here. So you have some ability to remove that. If I put it back on, there you have it. These items down below, you can also say, what if I want to remove the estimates, the sales tax, the inventory, the payroll, and so on. Like the estimates here, the payroll information, and so on. To do that, you'd have to turn on or off the default settings. So if you clicked on one of these items from the desktop view, it would take you to the settings for these particular items. If you turn them off, they will have an impact on the home page. They will no longer show up on the home page because they're not going to be there to be used. So if I go to the estimates, for example, it would take me down here to the jobs and estimates, which we'll talk about in more detail later. But just note, this is where you'd have to go to turn off the estimates in order to get the icon to be removed from the home page. So if I go here, if I went to the sales tax, same thing. If I wanted to take the sales tax icon off, it would take me down here in the preferences. I'd have to turn it off to remove the sales tax. Finance charges here. So if we're in the finance charges, we're in the company preferences. You got the annual interest rate. If you're going to be having finance charges, they're going to not be any by default generally. A minimum finance charge, the grace period, the finance charge account. If you're going to have the finance charges, meaning, if someone pays late, you're going to charge finance charges on it. Assess finance charges on overdue finance charges, and then calculate charges from the due date or the invoice bill date. Mark finance charge invoice to be printed. So these are the defaults. We're going to keep the defaults as they are in our practice problems for those items. And then we're in the general. We're in my preferences. So this is an area where you might commonly go to have some things that you might have personal preferences about. These are mainly the default. Passing enter moves between fields. Pressing enter moves between fields. Some people like that when they do the data input instead of having to hit tab. Automatically open drop-down lists when typing. That's usually a pretty good thing to have. It's nice to have, so I keep that on. It's the default beep when recording a transaction. You might get annoyed by that, so you could turn that off. Automatically place decimal points. Some people don't like typing the decimal points, so you could just type the numbers with the decimal digits and remove the decimal, not have to type the decimal. Warn when editing a transaction, so that's on by default. You may not like that, pop up so you could turn that off. Bring back all one-time messages. That's off by default, which I would think would be good. Turn off pop-up messages for products and services. I would think that would be a nice one to have off. Show tooltips for clipped texts is on by default. Warn when deleting a transaction or unused list item. So then we have the automatically recall information, automatically remember account or transaction information, pre-fill accounts for vendors based on past entries. That's the default. I think we're going to change this actually in the future to automatically recall last transactions for this name. Both of these are useful tools to help with the data input in the future to kind of help by drawing in data from the past. So you might experiment with those two and see which is best for you. Default date to use for new transactions, use the last entered date as default. This is another one that might be depending on what you are actually doing. If you're doing a whole lot of data input for a whole year, this would be much better than using the current date because it's always going to take you to the current date, which is going to be confusing. If you're doing stuff real time all the time, then the current date might be the place to go. We're going to keep it over here, which is the default. Keep custom item information when changing item in transfer. It's going to say ask for the option. That's where we're going to keep it. Company preferences in the general company preferences, show portions of an hour as a decimal, or as minutes. So we're going to show them as minutes as opposed to a decimal of an hour, which is the default. Always show years as 4-digit is the default. Never update name information when saving transactions. Save transactions before printing. These are all the defaults. Log off every time a user closes the company or exits. And then if you want, you can have the keep user logged in and put the date frame, depending on, that might save some time, so you can experiment with that as well.